Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Randy Reinhardt of the Pantagraph out of Bloomington, right? Bloomington, Illinois, Randy?
Correct.
There we
Bloomington
go.
Normal. Yes.
All right, there you go. And I got your last name right. Reinhardt?
Reinhardt is correct. Yes.
Perfect. Perfect.
Very
Randy,
good.
kind enough to join us here to preview the Iowa versus Illinois State game coming up this weekend, August 31st, kicking off the 2024 season for the Hawkeyes and the Redbirds, of course. Believe it or not, if you're a former listener of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, this is the second time Randy and I have joined each other to preview an Illinois State game previously on my UNI beat. But before we get started, make sure that you hit that subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Drop a like, drop a comment on YouTube. So, Randy, Illinois State, the number 20 team in the FCS to start the season. I know they were, I guess, kind of middle of the road in the MVFC for a few years there. You could almost chalk it up as a win for UNI for a while, and then State would sneak one out or something like that. It just kind of seems like a back and forth between Illinois State and the Panthers. But what are your expectations for the Redbirds this year? Are they high considering they're in the top 25 to start the year? Like, where are things at in normal Bloomington?
Yeah, I think their expectations really are high. I think a playoff run is or a playoff berth. First of all, you got to have a playoff berth before you can have a playoff run. But yeah, I think a playoff berth is very realistic. But one thing that always comes into play is, as you'll remember from your Northern Iowa days, is being part of the Missouri Valley. Although Illinois State is rated 20th or 19th in one poll, 20th in the other. Nationally in FCS, there are five other teams in the conference rated higher than they are. And I believe there was actually one more team rated higher than the Redbirds in the actual conference preseason poll. So I believe the Redbirds were seventh there, and it's very possible um, to be realistically ranked seventh in this conference and still be considered a top 20 national team.
Right. It's a mouthful, but I always like to go back to the saying of, for those who don't follow FCS football, the MVFC is like the SEC of the FCS. It's just a gauntlet. And like teams like Illinois State start off their season playing a power four team, and then they go into this ridiculous schedule. I don't know what Illinois State's schedule looks like off the top of my head, but I imagine they play the Dakotas, South Dakota, North Dakota, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, of course, the reigning national champs, and North Dakota State being one of the perennial top programs in the country. And then you've got UNI, and then you've got Southern Illinois. So, like, what does that schedule look like to you for Illinois State on top of playing Iowa at one point this year?
Yeah, it breaks fairly well for the Redbirds this year with the amount of teams in the conference. There are two teams each year that each team does not play. So the two teams the Redbirds don't play this year are South Dakota and South Dakota State, who happen to both be ranked in the top five or six overall. So that's kind of a nice schedule break. But then you still play North Dakota State, you still play Southern Illinois, you still play Northern Iowa. So it's still a very good schedule, but it does work well that at least two of the teams predicted to be among the top five nationally, that you're not going to see it all in the regular season.
And so let's get back to Illinois State's roster here, especially nowadays in college football, you can see so much turnover in one year, let alone at the FCS level where you're trying to get as many FBS guys on your roster in the offseason as you can. You're potentially seeing some of your best players move up, to power four or group of five football. Is it a pretty much a new slate at Illinois State, or is there a lot of seasoned vets on the roster? What are you looking at here for the Redbirds?
The Redbirds really did well as far as not losing very many players in the portal. I would say the two biggest ones, they had a cornerback who started most of the season last year, but has gotten in the portal and actually ended up taking a another step in FCS, so did not move up to FBS. And there was the running back from Cole Mueller from 2 years ago that was the leading rusher. Decided to go elsewhere, but their running back room is really loaded this year, so I think they'll be fine with that one. So um, they did bring in a quarterback from Kansas State uh, who will be playing. We're not exactly sure how much yet, but he will be playing. A couple of defensive linemen and an offensive lineman from Minnesota who will probably be a starter. So as far as portals, pluses and minuses, they're probably on the plus side there pretty easily.
So you mentioned that quarterback from Kansas State, Jake, is it Rubley?
Probably correct. Yes.
Rubley? Believe it or not, I went ahead and looked him up. He was a 4-star on Rivals, and Iowa offered him out of the portal. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that I didn't recognize that name, first of all. But I mean, I wasn't on the beat then. But secondly, that a program like Iowa didn't go after Rubley in the portal, so he ends up, or another program at the Group of Five or Power Four level, considering he was a 4-star back then, and of course gets beat out by some talented guys at Kansas State like Will Howard and the new guy who beat out Will Howard. But what, I guess, have you been able to watch him? Have you been able to watch them practice, go to camp, anything like that? Like, what have you seen, and who is he competing with at that quarterback spot?
Yeah, he was here for spring ball, so he got introduced to the program, and he's a son of TJ Rubley, former NFL quarterback. So he's certainly got a history, a family history of playing the position at a high level. He's looked really good from the second he's gotten here. He's got a great arm. Appears to have good pocket presence. Can move around a little bit in the pocket, kind of keep himself alive, and he's got a very strong and accurate arm. Um, he's competing with, but it sounds like both of them are going to more likely play. Tommy Rittenhouse has been the backup the last 2 seasons to Zach Annexstad. Both of these last 2 seasons, Annexstad was hurt late in the year, so Rittenhouse ended up playing the last 3 or 4 games each of the last 2 years. So he does have a decent amount of playing experience. He's more of a running quarterback, but he's improved his arm strength and his arm accuracy over the years. So basically they have two quarterbacks, and they don't sound like that they're going to pick one before the game, that they're kind of going into the season expecting to play both in each game based on the situations. So I don't think it's a matter of sometime next week they're going to say this guy is the starting quarterback. So obviously they'll have to start one of them for the first drive of the season at Kinnick Stadium, but I think there's a really strong chance both of them will be playing.
Okay, so now there is that moniker that if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Is that a concern for you? One, and two, when I hear that, especially matching up against an FCS program, as somebody who covers Iowa, it sounds like an opportunity for Iowa to kind of pin their ears back and get after the quarterback, considering it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, but it seems like, and I guess my first thought when I heard Rubley was transferring to Illinois State, that he would probably step in and become the starter. And even some of the Redbirds may have thought that too. But I think the improvement of Rittenhouse has kind of put them into a situation where this guy needs to play too. So I don't think that I'm sure it'll be based on situations, obviously, but they do have similar talents. But Rittenhouse is a better runner, but he's not a terrible passer. Rubley is a better passer, but he can still run some too. So it's not. I know I've seen several plays at practice where if Rubley is in there, that I'm sure they'll run him some, and Rittenhouse won't just run when he's in there. So I'm sure the opposing defenses will look at that as, okay, if Rittenhouse is in, we really need to be wary of the run because he is fast and he's a good runner. But I don't think they will be exclusively one or the other if one of those two is in the game.
Okay. Now, when we're looking at the rest of the Illinois State offense, it's hard not to look at Iowa's defense with 8 guys returning on one of the best defenses in all of FBS football last year. Top 5 defense. Obviously, you lose a Cooper DeJean, but 8 guys returning. Defense going to be loaded. What are some strengths for Illinois State right off the bat? I think you mentioned the running back group being a strong point for the Redbirds running back, or for the Redbirds offense rather.
Yes, it really is, and that it will be really interesting to watch because even Big Ten teams have a heck of a time moving the ball against Iowa, and most likely will again this season. So will certainly be a huge challenge for the Redbirds. I think they can, without insulting any future opponent, I think they'll walk out of Kinnick Stadium on that Saturday saying, "Well, we just even if we go to the national championship game, we've probably faced the best defense we will have faced all season." So, yeah, they should be pretty solid or pretty well balanced. Mason King is the number one returning running back. If you look at their statistics from last year, he went by Mason Blakemore. So he gained just under 1,000 yards, and he missed a game. So he definitely would have can be considered a 1,000 yard rusher. But he decided for family reasons. I talked to him about this. It was King is the last name on his mother's side, and he wanted to honor that side of his family. So he decided he wanted to go by Mason King this year. So it is not a different player. It's the same player that Mason Blakemore was on the stat sheet from last year, but he's now Mason King. So he has been a little banged up in fall. He hasn't practiced a whole lot lately, but and he is coming off shoulder surgery too. But he says he's fine. The coaches say he's fine. I'm sure they're just keeping him out of contact as best they can. Then the number 2 guy right now is a Winkers Wright, a kid from Southern Indiana who's had some really good flashes in the past. He's had a little trouble staying healthy, but then they have a transfer from Western Illinois, Seth Glatz, who will probably get some time also, and a couple of young running backs, Josh Robinson and Lawson. And Matt Lawson, yes, I was blanking on his first name there, but Josh Robinson and Matt Lawson, who are a couple of young tailbacks who are have been impressive. So they have several options there.
Now, I think what a lot of us expect to be the real battle for Iowa is just figuring things out offensively. Really, right now they're kind of in a quarterback situation, quarterback battle of their own between Cade McNamara and Brendan Sullivan. And what I do know, what I do remember about Illinois State is Zeke Vandenberg being an absolute monster on the defensive front for the Redbirds a couple years ago. He was the FCS Defensive Player of the Year that year, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yep.
So
The
not
Buckeye
on the
Cannon
roster.
Award. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I imagine he's gone. But is that still kind of a noteworthy thing for Illinois State pass rush? Like, what does the defense look like? What are their strong points?
Yeah, they really do love to bring pressure. Probably the 2 biggest guys to watch there are Jalen Gaines. They technically play a 3-4 defense, but the one of the 4 linebackers does line up on the line of scrimmage quite a bit. So it's a 3-4 that looks a lot like a 4-3. But Jalen Gaines is that what they call the jack linebacker. So he lines up on the edge, is a good pass rusher, and then the other one would be linebacker Amir Abdullah, who led the team in sacks last year, was 9th in voting for the FCS Defensive Player of the Year last year. He put up some really big numbers, had 9.5, 10 sacks, somewhere in there. So those are the 2 primary pass rushers.
Okay, and that's their staple. They like to get after the quarterback. Like, right, yes.
Yes, and
Okay.
they will bring up a safety every once in a while too, to Keandre Jackson, the strong safety. Every once in a while, he'll creep up on the line and just and come on the blitz. So that's something else they like to do too.
So prerogative, get after the quarterback. Does that cause turnovers? Like, is there anything additionally that they like? I mean, obviously sacking the quarterback's a win in itself, but like if you can cause turnovers, that's a big win too. I guess is that their prerogative, part of their prerogative too, in getting after the quarterback?
That's something that obviously that's a goal of their defense. They've been good, but I wouldn't say great at forcing turnovers the last couple of years. But each of the last couple of years they've been among the best FCS teams nationwide in sacks. So they do end up getting a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures. But it's something that did also hurt them sometimes last year when you do bring a lot of pressure. If the quarterback does get away, then there may be some room for him to run. So they did give up quite a few yards on quarterback scrambles last year too. So that's something they really need to be aware of, that if they're blitzing somebody and they don't get the sack, then they've still got to make the play.
Right. And while we're mentioning that, does that maybe hurt their ability to stop the run too? Because what we've heard out of camp so far is Iowa's offensive line is much improved, and we saw it at Kids Day open practice. The run game looked pretty solid. Does that inhibit, their desire to get after the quarterback? Does that kind of inhibit their ability to stop the run too, occasionally, or what do you think there?
Uh, Occasionally, yes. That can be a problem, especially just running straight ahead, which I would certainly expect Iowa to do. Use their power and try to run it down the Redbirds' throat, basically, or at least try to. So, yeah, that can be it can be a problem. They do have some good young defensive linemen, but they don't have a returning guy who is returning conference all-star or anything like that. Jake Anderson is a defensive tackle who was on, I believe he was on the second team of the Missouri Valley preseason team, and he did have a good year last year. So they do have some good young players, but they don't have anybody with a whole lot of career achievements behind their name.
Now, when we're looking at just the season ahead for Illinois State, every team got its storylines everybody wants to follow, right? Sounds like quarterback situation's a big thing with the Redbirds. Is there anything else that maybe you or fans are like, okay, this is what we're looking at game one, or maybe even once they ease into maybe a little bit easier part of their schedule in the non-con that folks are watching for Illinois State this year?
Yeah, I think the probably the big thing is just the development of the offensive line. They do have some good experience there, but they've made some changes there too. So they brought in JJ Gade from Minnesota, who's going to start at tackle. They have probably their probably quite possibly the best pro prospect on the entire team is offensive lineman Hunter Zambrano. He's played tackle the last couple of years. They would like to move him into guard this year, and that was the idea, bringing in JJ Gade to play that tackle spot, so Zambrano could come in and play guard. Have a couple other transfers. They have a couple guys from Duke who will. Elijah Roten is a possible starting center. Ron Carr will not be playing at Iowa. He's coming off an injury, but he was at Duke, and he could factor in later on. So I think putting that offensive line together and having them become a cohesive unit is going to be really important.
There are two more questions that I want to ask before we get into like predicting score and stuff like that. First one is, in your time covering Illinois State, or maybe even in recent memory, have you seen the Redbirds pull off a FBS upset at all?
Yes, a few actually.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact year right now, but it was maybe 10 years or so ago. They went up to Northwestern and beat the Wildcats on a last second field goal. I believe that was 10-9. So that was it was a short field goal that hit at the buzzer, that hit the upright and glanced in, and all of a sudden the Redbirds had themselves a a win over a Big Ten conference team. Um, I've also seen them beat Central Michigan up there. They went out to Colorado State and beat them several years ago. So they definitely have done it, and they do have a Big Ten win. But
Sure.
I don't think this Iowa team is probably a little higher or maybe a lot higher in class than what that particular Northwestern team was.
Yeah. I'm looking at ESPN here, something I like to reference before we talk final score predictions or anything like that. But ESPN has Iowa at a 92.9% chance to win. If Illinois State somehow pulls it off, how do they do it?
Um, I would say defensively, first of all, can't give up any big plays. If they can hold Iowa under 20 points, then, and of course that has happened to Iowa quite a bit. They usually don't score a lot anyway. But if they can hold them under 20 points, they'll need a couple turnovers. They may need a special teams play, maybe a long pass. Somebody breaks open. But I if they are going to pull off what would be a large upset, that they would need a couple things like that to go right and still be able to hold their own at the line of scrimmage and not be totally run on all day.
All right. Well, with that in mind, we shall see. And the way I see this shaking out, generally in these first few games, maybe not so much against Iowa State in week two, but when Iowa plays in these games that maybe they could win by a ton, they score a few points, but nothing really blows up. So I guess what I'm getting at is a final score prediction of 24-6. What do you see from the Redbirds and the Hawkeyes this coming weekend in Kinnick Stadium?
Okay. Well, that is interesting because as soon as you brought that up, I started going through scores in my head, and the first one I came about was exactly 24-6.
Hey,
So we're thinking somewhat alike. So
there we go.
I can see the Hawkeyes probably scoring somewhere in the 20s, and the Redbirds most likely being held below 10. Like I said, they're going to need a big play. A pick six, a return touchdown, something like that to really probably get into the teens and make it interesting in the fourth quarter. Um, but they do have that capability.
And
So I don't want to copy you, Elliot. So let
sure.
me go. Let me go 27-3 then
Okay.
with mine there. So that I can't take your 24-6, even though that's what I was thinking too.
A little wider margin. There we go.
Yeah.
To offer you a little bit more context, I probably should have before I gave my score prediction. I do think Iowa just runs the heck out of the ball on Saturday. I mean, obviously they'll have to put the ball in the air on occasion, but what we saw at Kids Day was which is their fall open practice.
Mhm.
They named the kid captains for the season, but it was rough. I'm not sure how much you've looked into Iowa at this point, Randy, but their longest completion of Kids Day was 13 yards to a
Okay.
freshman, and it was with the second string. And so, Cade McNamara, I'd have to go back and look at his stats, but he was, I think, 7 of 21 or 8 of 22, something like that, for 20 yards and a would be pick six. So, Illinois State's going to have, may potentially have some opportunities by way of some rough quarterback play
Yeah.
to this point.
Well, if the Iowa offense is going against the Iowa defense in practice, that can't be an easy job either. But I
Right.
know there have certainly been some well documented struggles with the Hawkeyes putting points on the board.
Yeah. Oh, you're preaching to the choir, Randy. All right. We will see how it all shakes out this weekend in Kinnick Stadium. Randy, will you be there?
No, unfortunately, I will not. As a one man sports staff, I have some other duties that I will be attending to that weekend, so I
Fair
will
enough.
not be. But that's more of that's definitely more of a budgetary thing than a lack of interest. If it was totally up to me, I would definitely be there.
Well, you can follow along. I'm sure you'll be watching the game too, but folks
Yes.
can follow along on Twitter for both of us. Again, Randy Reinhardt joining us from the Pantagraph. Randy, we appreciate it a lot.
All right. Thanks, Elliot. Good to talk to you.
You too. We'll wrap it up here. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of HawkCast, brought to you by Iowa.Rivals.com and Hawkeye Beacon. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that today at Iowa.Rivals.com/subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube as well. Leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play. Leave a comment as well on YouTube. What's your final score prediction? Are Randy and I right? 24-6 or 27-3, of course. Let us know. For now, my name is Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, and we will see you next time.